Here we have, people coming remotely. Are we set?
Yep.
Okay. So welcome for those of you who are not in the room, who are joining us remotely or here at Bancroft Elementary School on the east side of Wilmington. We have a number of folks that are here with us in the auditorium, most of which are aligned with or part of the Christina School District already. We have the principal, Ms. Greenfield. Thank you for hosting us the other day. We'll talk about that in a minute. Ms. Suchi, who was here a minute ago, who was our tour guide last Saturday as we knocked doors in the neighborhood. We have Don Patton, who's a member of the Christina School Board. Don gets perfect attendance. He has been at every one of our 3 town hall meetings. Don, we appreciate that. Vince Lofink, I don't know from the state school board, I don't know that he made all of them, but he's made almost all of them, 3 out of the 4. I thought it was that. Vince, Representative Lofink, we thank you for being with us as well. Dan Shelton is here, the superintendent. We thank you for your presence. So we're going to do our presentation again as we had the last 3 nights and as we've done almost closing in on 100 times, meeting with other elected officials, community members, education advocates. We have Pam, who's our sign language expert for the deaf and hard of hearing, and Tiffany, who's new with us tonight. We appreciate the 2 of them being with us as well. So we've been working with the Christina School District now for 4 years at least, and we have an MOU that defines the relationship, the additional resources that the state is making available, the accommodations that the teachers union has made with a separate MOU with them, and we're in our 2nd version of that, I believe, that was just recently approved. And so we continue to make progress there. We were in the neighborhood on Saturday, knocking on doors. We visited with Mrs. Suchi. Is that she there leaning on the, no, that's, she's still doing sign-in. So she knew where a lot of the children who attend the school here, where they lived, and she took us to their homes and we talked to them and their parents. We talked to former students that she knew that were here that have choiced into other schools and other school districts. So we had an opportunity to talk to them. It was really a good day, probably our best day of door knocking. John Sheen is with us, wouldn't you say? And we had a group with us handing out flyers. There's Mrs. Suchi. Thank you for being our tour guide on Saturday. This is, as I said, our last town hall meeting to get input on our plan, which is really a framework for a collaboration among the 3 main school districts that have children in buildings here in the city of Wilmington. Red Clay with Highlands, Lewis, Warner, and Shortledge, Christina with Byard and Bancroft, with Pulaski as swing space right now, and Palmer in South Wilmington, which we hope will be occupied by the ILA as a training center. And then we have Stubbs, which is now an early childhood center and a parent support center just near Howard, and Helen Anderson, who's in the back, is one of our people who heads up the parent support center, a concept that we like, that everyone seems to like, and it works for parents and hopefully for children, and something that we're thinking about doing on the west side as well. We have plans to build a new Bancroft. That's not the subject of our meeting tonight. We have had several walkthroughs with the community and community meetings, and we thank Dan and his staff for that cooperation as well. So with that kind of a setting of the table, Jim Simmons, who's our director of the Office of Equity in the Department of Education, we appreciate you being here to walk us through the slideshow.
Thank you, Governor, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come out at this time of year with the holidays fastly approaching, dinner time, and the Eagles about to beat the Washington Redskins tonight. So we thank you for taking your time to come out to that. We're going to go through the PowerPoint and then field some questions, either myself, the Governor, or John Sheehan. So, but not only to just get questions, but to gather feedback to continue to grow this collaborative. So let's dig right in. So the collaborative is really a framework that is built from a number of different models that we've seen across the country, a lot of them called innovation zone or empowerment zones. We've taken that framework and built that to say we're going to build that together along with the folks who have boots on the ground, not something where we come and deliver a package and hope that you buy in. What we'd like to do is gather information, feedback, build this together so that we can say that it's an inclusive process of those folks who have to deliver on the work. On the slide behind me talks about a number of problems, current situations that we have that happen, to be quite honest, in probably every school in the country. What we've seen is that they are exacerbated in our city schools here in Wilmington. We can start with Wilmington's structure is broken up into 4/5 school districts when you look at Newcastle County VOTEC with just the high school piece. And so students who live in our city are fractured by neighborhoods, sometimes blocks. I've often told the story about how a student has to transition from Brandywine School District to Red Clay School District just simply by moving a block or two. What that does is impacts, one, their comfort level with their building, the structure, the principal, their teachers, the curriculum. All those things impact that student's ability to be as best as he can be for that year in terms of his academic performance. We look at the buildings and structures in our buildings across all of our districts. There's a different level of expectations around what buildings look like. I often say buildings don't educate kids, but certainly environments conducive to learning are important. And so the governor mentioned some of the rehab that is taking place in Christina and will continue to move forward. In a second, I'll show a slide that talks about recruiting and retention and the data that we see around what's happening with retaining teachers. I think that's the biggest one right now, but retaining teachers and the impact that had. We'll talk about that in a second. All of those things, plus many other things, lead to high absenteeism and low performance. This slide is the data that I just referred to. If you see that the state average is about 66%. I'm doing this off the top of my head without looking. As the governor said, I think we're on about presentation number 100. But if you look at all the schools listed in the city, everyone across the board is below the state average. I don't want to pick on any one school in particular, but you can see the data. And so if we look at just the lowest one, which I think is about 30%, what that says is that every 3 years, 7 out of 10 teachers have now transitioned. Oh, that's okay, I didn't know what that was. Okay, so 7 out of those teachers have transitioned. As a former principal, what does that mean? What does that look like? My climate and my culture is completely disrupted every 3 years or so because I've got to retrain teachers on the way that we do things, the expectations that we have. What does it have on curriculum? That means that comfort level of staff, as they work through curriculum over a period of time, you get more comfortable. Your lesson plans become better when you use them from year to year that are using that curriculum. What does that mean to students? That means that every 3 years, there's a different group of teachers who have different expectations that they've got to meet. What does that mean to families? Where's the trust that you can develop? Where's the relationships that you build and maintain? Because every 3 years is a different group. I've often told this story, and it shows about all the gray that I'm hiding behind this mask, that I've actually had the privilege of working in Brandywine School District for over 20 years, and I was fortunate to sometimes have siblings, multiple siblings, and even mother and then daughter. But I'd always preface that with that I started teaching when I was 12. So I'm not that old. So that retention data is important. But what we've got to do is figure out how we can retain them. And what we've oftentimes done is looked at data that says, why do they leave? I think we've got to reframe that question to say, why do they stay? And find those reasons that people stay and then apply those things as well. So here's what this looks like. We're asking the big three, but we're not excluding anyone. We're talking about any school or building in the city that is willing to participate with us. This framework is built upon creating a board of trustees or advisory board that is focused solely on those issues in the city. I think it's important for everyone to hear that this is not a blame game. We're not blaming Christina. We're not blaming Red Clay. We're not blaming Brandywine. What we're saying is it's a capacity issue. There's so much for superintendents to do. I see Superintendent Shelton sitting right in front of me. There's so much for he and his staff to do. This is an opportunity to provide an additional resource that only focuses on the city. With this board that's focused on the city, with a staff, a small staff that oversees day-to-day operations. And so when things happen district-wide, in this case, Christina would have to go and manage those things district-wide. With those other schools that are in the suburbs, this staff could solely focus on what's going on in the city. The important part to also add is that the schools who decide to participate would not leave their district. They would remain schools in the Christina, Red Clay, or Brandywine School District. And I'll mention also that this would happen with a series of MOUs that we would work and negotiate between each of the districts. Some of those agreements in that MOU would be different from district to district, but we think some of those may be the same, but we don't want to say what they are because that would be counterproductive to saying that this is a collaborative and we want to work with people. Here's a few things that we think. Who participates? We're asking people to volunteer. This is not a takeover model. We want people to come on their own accord and decide that they want to partner with us. What I've said in the past is given everyone the opportunity to be on the right side of history. It creates some flexibility around how we hire staff, how we use staff, what's the length of our day, what's our schedule look like in these participating schools. We want to also empower teachers and create these educational leadership teams. We saw a presentation a couple Fridays ago from the NEA with research that stated that if and when teachers are involved in decision-making process, they're more willing to stay. That helps support that retention data that we were talking about earlier. I think I got most of the stuff on this slide. Oh, I talked about remaining in the district and the collaboration. I want to talk about collaboration briefly for a second. When I was the principal at Mount Pleasant High School, I was fortunate that we implemented professional learning communities, or PLCs, prior to it being a state mandate, and I saw the impact that it had on our content areas, all our math teachers together, 45 minutes a week, working together on different things and collaborating. Imagine what that could do if we could do the same thing across 3 districts, across multiple schools, and giving our teachers the chance to do that. And lastly, I'm going to talk about community organizations and community input. Again, one of the things that's been missing when I say community, that includes family, getting input into what this should look like and actually finding out what it is that they want and or need that they think can make their students successful. We oftentimes decide what they need and do it for them, and we want to make sure that they have some input into that as well. So some of the additional investments, I believe the most important one is starting early with the pre-K. So we're going to invest in some additional pre-K seats, even to include the possibility of full-day full-day kindergarten. We talked about extending the day and year, and I think what we mean by that, I know what we think by that, again, is enrichment opportunities, not asking teachers to teach longer days, longer years, but doing something in enrichment opportunity for kids. I said yesterday at this presentation that we have an achievement gap because we have an opportunity gap. We haven't found enough ways to give students multiple opportunities to learn the information that teachers are providing during the day in a different manner. Curriculum. If, in fact, this collaborative group decides that they want to have a common curriculum, that would be something that the state would be willing to take on. Also, if we talk about lowering class sizes, which has been suggested, we're willing to take on the additional staffing costs. That includes incentives as well. So what does this look like? The governor explained earlier that we've been on the road since about middle of September. November, we started meeting with each of the individual boards. We went back and revisited to field questions. Christina actually had a board workshop that we attended and answered some additional questions, that we've been meeting with tons and tons of other groups in hopes that the boards will vote to give the superintendents the ability and to negotiate with us, and what would and could an MOU look like as we build this collaborative. If and when that happens, and I'm going to say a bigger win, and maybe that's wishful thinking, that when that happens, then we'll start to plan that out with hopes that we can start in the fall as a stage one of implementation of this plan as we move forward, with the understanding that there's lots of work to do. We don't want to rush through it, but we want to take our time, make sure that we get the plan in place the right way versus rushing to get it done. This slide talks about the 4 of the town halls that we've had, this being the last one tonight. It's live on Facebook, YouTube. We're here, you're here, and at this point, I'm done talking. Turn the mic over to the governor and those of you who are here or in the audience who have any questions. Governor.
Thank you, Jim, and we await your questions, your comments, your suggestions. But I'd like to start off with a couple conversations that I had. One last night at Harlan with Representative Chikoka, and essentially his question was, how does the work that we're doing, and he and I've had this discussion before, work in conjunction with the Reading Commission. One of the reasons that we decided to move forward with the Innovation Zone concept, the collaborative, as we're calling it, adapting it to Wilmington. We had visited a version of this in Springfield, Massachusetts 3 or 4 years ago when Darrell Green was in the position that Jim has now. He's moved over to Red Clay, and after coming back, Representative Chikoka was with us on that trip. By the way, we were very impressed with what we saw and decided that we wanted to move forward. We took a step back when Senator Lockman decided that she wanted to create the Reading Commission and all the things that were associated with that, but decided as they continued their conversations to move forward with this, because we believe that this sets the table for whatever they might recommend doing in the future, and it moves us forward as we wait. One of the things that I have as a governor who's got 3 years left on a second term is a sense of urgency and the desire to get something done to address probably the most important issue that I'm dealing with as your governor, and certainly an issue that's been around for my whole 30 years in public service. I'd like to share with you conversations I had this Saturday as we visited parents and children. We ran into a young 6th grader by the name of Carlos, and Masucci knew Carlos because he used to be a student of hers here at Bancroft, and he decided with his parents to go somewhere else. And we were having this conversation with him about that. And one of the things he's raised is something that we've heard before, that he felt like he couldn't focus on what was happening in the classroom because there was disruption there. And as we've talked to parents and students, as we've talked to teachers, that issue comes at us all the time. And so the question gets to be, how do you help students concentrate on learn where there are other students in the classroom that are dealing with social, emotional problems that need to be dealt with for them to learn and for the children around them to learn? So as I think about the challenges for the collaboration board and focusing on the things that are most important to the students and the families here in all of the city schools, and we heard it in our tour. I spent half a day here at Bancroft and the afternoon at Warner, and we heard the same thing, mostly from teachers who teach in that environment, to figure out the best way to both deal with the social emotional issues and problems that children bring to the classroom so that they can learn, and that so the other children who are in those classrooms to learn. And I think, for me anyway, as a non-educator, talking to the teachers about that issue, talking to the students and the parents about that was very helpful in framing, one of the big challenges that we face. We are proposing this model because it's worked in other places, because my responsibility as governor is not just for the children in the Christina School District, where we already have a memorandum of understanding with the district and board and with the teachers union, the teachers that work here, but the responsibility for all the students across our city and the other districts as well, in Red Clay and Brandywine. So if we have questions or comments, we're ready to take those, and we've got some coming online that we can take. Sure. First of all, where'd you get that Washington football team sweatshirt?
Farmers Market. Jimmy, Governor, I have two questions. Number one, can you explain why the Colonial School District is not included? And what if, let's say, one of the three districts votes not to come in? Will it still go forward?
So two questions that both of which we've had before. Colonial does not have any buildings in the city. They have some territory, if that's the right word, where students that live in certain areas of the city go out to they used to have a building in the Northeast. It doesn't exist anymore with Colonial, and so we've been focusing on the three main districts with a significant number of students, families, territory, if you will, and school buildings. The other issue that we hear a lot of that's kind of related to that is the issue of why are you only doing pre-kindergarten to 8th grade? Why not high school as well? And we hear that everywhere we go about the high school issue. And it's a big issue and an important issue, and one that has to be dealt with. We believe that it ought to be prioritized among the districts and with the collaboration board as an issue that they think about and figure out what's the best way to do it. Here's the way I look at it. First thing is, we have 200 empty seats at Howard. The Howard has just spent almost $100 million on the historic 27 building, as well as the rehabbing the 72 building. It's a beautiful facility and ought to be full of students. We have students, or we have high schools all around the perimeter of the city, except for the old Wilmington High School with charter that have empty seats. We were knocking doors in Hedgeville, and Kevin Kelly, who was with us that day, said that the feeder pattern for children that live here in Hedgeville is Glasgow High School. And that doesn't make a lot of sense when you have seats in high schools all around. So there's a lot of thought that needs to go into that question, something that we believe the board should look at right away. The first question that you had is, what if people decide not to participate? I think that would be the wrong decision. I think we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And we will continue to focus on our relationship with Christina. I'm hopeful that, given the fact that we have MOUs already in place, that we would continue to work with them. But we're gonna try to get more public support, and we could use your public support as well for this concept, so that the board members in those other districts can see their way to at least engaging us. So it's going to be a two-step process, making a decision to engage with the state, to consider developing an MOU, which is where the details are in terms of administrative issues that are important to boards and to all of us, frankly, and then ultimately the approval of an operating memorandum of understanding. Again, going back to my comments earlier about the Reading Commission, this is something that could set the table for whatever they might decide to do. In my conversations with elected officials and others who are very focused on this issue and have been for their whole, for the last 30 years, they wanted to address some of those larger issues, and so do I. But I want to do it in a way, collaboratively, where we can develop solutions that with broad public support, and I think that we can do it. That's why I'm spending so much of my time trying to talk to people across our city about the issues that we confront and the best ways to do that. And that's why I appreciate Don and Vince and all the folks who've joined us for these town hall meetings for their participation and for their questions and comments. We've got a tremendous amount of feedback. Most of the feedback has come from teachers in the respective districts, and that's understandable because they are in these classrooms every day and they know the issues better than all of us. Yes, ma'am. And we got another here. John's got a
Thank you. Hi, my name is Helen Martin, and I'm a caregiver as well as a PACE leader. My question, which I have three, they're very short. They can really be, I'm sorry, thank you. They can really be simple yes or no. My first question is, how much of this information is available on a website that parents and caregivers can check into?
It's not a yes or no answer, but we have that information.
So if you go to, hi, John Sheehan with the governor's office, if you go to de.gov/WLC, and I think if we go to the final slide, we can have it up there. The information is available, and there's also a feedback form, so folks can submit their comments, and we've probably gotten about 25 comments, and we've read through every one of them. I had 2 Zoom follow-ups today with folks who submit comments, so certainly if you can share with your network, de.gov/WLC has a bunch of information on there and would love to hear feedback from folks.
No problem. Also, another question I have is, how much input have you received currently from parent and caregivers?
Yeah, great question. I'll start and then hand it over. So we did a town hall with the Delaware PTA and heard some good feedback. We, as the governor mentioned, we were out knocking on doors and had some great conversations with parents, spoke with folks like Sarah Green, a parent leader, and the PTA president at Warner. And certainly if you have ideas or forums where we could talk to more parents, we are certainly, as Jim and the governor said, I think we've had 100 or so meetings and would love to get in front of more parents. So I think we had some really good conversations this weekend with parents at their doors. But if you have suggestions or groups, please, I'll give you my card after this. Would love to connect and make sure we get in front of more parents.
And
not enough is the answer. But our best conversations have been at the door, knocking on the doors, talking to parents directly, sometimes with their children there, mostly the little itty bitty ones, and that's where we've gotten our best feedback, frankly, and input. And their basic question is, what's it going to mean differently for my children? That's a really pretty simple question, and we've tried to answer that for them. Part of it, the answer is, well, that's for the Learning Collaborative to develop the changes and the things that'll be most important. There are some consistent themes that come out all the time that we talk. I mentioned the high school issue. I mentioned the issue of classroom climate and how children can learn. The other issue is the time frame, and Jim or John, you might want to do this. Is mostly a teacher issue. The first year is really kind of a planning year. What we hear from teachers is you're going to have a new curriculum and all this stuff right away, and there's fear that we've got a plan behind the plan. No. We want to get the administrative structure established so there's a citywide look, collaboration among the 3 districts to focus on, what are the changes that you would make for classrooms and for teachers and for students.
Okay, and my final question is who actually has the final say whether this is a yes or no?
So the final say is with the school district boards of education, and that's why it's important that Don is here, and he's been at every meeting. We've had other board members last night at Harlan. It's not a decision that the governor has the authority to do. I'm weighing in heavily, as you can see, and we'll continue to weigh in heavily. But the final decision rests at this point with the school boards. Thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your interest. I think we hit, yes, ma'am.
It's me. Hi, my name is Joanne Lewis, and I have 3 questions. On Saturday, there was a mention of building out and tearing down the old and building something new. So my question was, what property was going to be taken in order to do that. And a park was mentioned. I just need, for this question, I would like to know what area is going to be, I hate to say confiscated, of eminent domain.
Yeah, no, we're all talking about property that's currently owned by the Christina School District. So
Okay.
we can do that separately, or we could, if there aren't any other questions, we're happy to go through the plan with you, but we're in the process of planning it. So
Okay, so it's not, it hasn't been finalized or anything
No.
like that? All
that, what's pretty close to the end. We've got a lot of input, we've had walkthroughs.
So
with-
if you're pretty close to the end, then is this information on website, on your website? There's some. That may give me an idea?
Dan Shelton from Christina School District. So we've been meeting pretty regular about the project. It's been going on for about, I'd say 9 months. The third Tuesday of every month going forward, there will be a meeting right here. Tonight's meeting replaced the meeting that we have on the third Tuesday, because today is the third Tuesday. So every third Tuesday right here at 6 o'clock, we have a meeting about the Bancroft project specific. But the specific answer to your question is the school would be built on the Drew property between Lombard and Spruce. This school remains open and operating during construction, and then once construction is completed, this school would come down for parking and for fields.
Okay. My next question is...
So there's no park involved. I heard that as a major
Yes,
concern.
because
There's
I was concerned about the only park on this side that remains, and that's the big park.
Holloway.
You know what, forgive me, but I don't know very many names. But I know it's right either across the street or in this vicinity right here.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, because we do, in the summertime, we got the little programs going. There's a senior thing going over there. And I would just want to make sure... Right, absolutely. So I want to make sure that I understand that we're not going to be losing any more land.
That property is owned by the city of Wilmington.
Okay, great. The next question I have is, you talked about schools being not understaffed, but not enough children. So I would like to know if busing students, it's going to be a consideration of bringing them in to fill those slots, because I'm quite sure we may not have enough in this neighborhood to fill them all. But is that a proper...
Well, I can tell you this. There are a lot of students in this neighborhood that decide to go to choice to go to other schools. Our hope, my hope, is that the brand new building will be the first incentive for students to come back from whatever those schools are to the new Bancroft. There are other things that we plan to do, that this board will do, that hopefully will do the same. I gave you two examples earlier, Javion and Carlos, who decided, Javion actually, he moved to a fully remote for a little bit different reason, but Carlos went somewhere else because, some of the climate issues were getting in the way of his focus. So my view is new building, new approach, the kinds of supports that are necessary, and children will want to stay or come back.
Okay, and my final question, I believe is my final one. Wilmington, from what I understand, again, I'm not from this area, but your teachers, is it still predominantly Caucasian? And if it is, do you have a plan for recruitment and retention of black teachers, male and female? Because our children need to have those individuals in their eyesight and understand those people, our own people, as I say, black people, understand our children, and they will take whatever it is that the corporation comes up with in terms of teaching, and our children will have some positive images, some positive feedback, and maybe perhaps some community folks that'll be involved. So
first of all, it's a huge priority. Teachers, period. I mean, there's a shortage of teachers in Delaware, nationally, but teachers of color, a diverse student body. Just looking around, somebody can tell me what the exact numbers were. It seemed reasonably diverse when I was in here in Bancroft, but
In this building, it's more than 70% of our teaching staff is either of color or other constraints.
So a huge priority, nonetheless. just because there's a teacher shortage right now and for the reasons that you expressed.
And just to piggyback off that, my office, the Office of Equity and Innovation, has a project called Diversifying Delaware's Educator Workforce that Monique Martin is overseeing that work. And so we're partnering with John Neubauer, who is our Associate Secretary over Educator Support, who does recruiting and retention. So the combination of our offices are working on recruiting, retaining, and diversifying the educator workforce.
And Dr. Allen is putting a focus on teacher preparation at Delaware State University as well. And so that, I think, bodes well for the future. I saw recent numbers still. Most of the teachers that come into Delaware schools broadly, not just in the city, are from the University of Delaware, then I think Delaware State, and then Wilmington University or something like that. But everybody's struggling, and Dr. Shelton maybe could talk about the challenges that they have. I saw you wanted to comment on this?
I could just make a quick comment that one of the issues, the biggest issues, is not recruitment, because in a teacher shortage, the issue is teacher preparation programs. And I know the Superintendent's Association put a pitch out to Del Tech, and Del Tech is now going to open a program. And one of the purposes of that is so that we have a direct pipeline, so that we have our students that are going to work through our Teacher Academy, which is a career and technical education program, and from there can go into Del Tech on the SEED scholarship, not out-of-pocket expense, and then we can bring them back in by expanding, hopefully, in the future, our year-long residency program, so they never leave our district, they never leave our space, and we bring our own kids all the way through the system, and that's going to help us to get more teachers as well as diverse teachers.
But if you think about, if you could do one thing, the teacher thing would be the one thing. I mean, you saw could somebody go back, Jim, to, I mean, I must have been in Congress at the time, so it's 4 or 5 years ago. And I was with you, John, when we were at Etta Wilson. And we had about 20 teachers that were there. And most of them had long tenure, say 10 or 15 or more years. Most of them started here, one of the Christina's schools in the city. And for different reasons, all of them had a little bit different reasons, but they ended up moving out, and so they became the 70%. So doing things that keep people here, first attracting them in the first place, and then keeping them here has got to be a big priority. We do with our current MOU, we pay them an extra amount of money, and I don't know whether we have the loan repayment program for them as well, but looking for different ways to attract them and then keep them once they get here. Part of that is providing them what we've heard from the teachers. Give us the kind of support that we need to manage the classrooms that I was talking about and what the students themselves were telling us as we knock doors in the neighborhood.
Governor, we have a couple questions that we've received on Facebook. Erica from Facebook asks, is part of the plan in this collaborative to receive feedback from diverse students from different schools? Erica says their voices are key to understanding if things are going right or wrong in their classroom. So can you talk about student engagement?
Well, all I can say is that I had a great example just over the weekend as we were knocking doors, thanks to Ms. Suchi and introducing us to students, and just heard from them, you know, the challenges that they encountered as students. And so I think absolutely it's important, and something where you can get the perspective of children in the building. Now, in this case, one of the students was moved on to 6th grade, I guess, and moved to a different school, and Javion was still here, but I guess you have a full remote option that he was taking advantage of.
And just one more from Facebook, and raise your hand in the crowd here if you'd like me to walk this mic over to you. But one more from Jeremiah on Facebook, who attends all of our virtual meetings. He said, does this have all the money to go forward? So are there resources behind this plan?
Yeah, so we're in our budget cycle now. In fact, we're getting down to, this is December, the end of December is when the governor's budget is kind of put to bed. We had a big session today. We have committed in actually a legal settlement significant additional funds for what we call opportunity funding, which is funding that goes to schools based on the number of of low-income students and English learners that they have. So a school like Bancroft, all the schools we're talking about would get additional resources through opportunity funding. And we started out that with, I think, less than $10 million a year. This year will be $38 million. We'll ramp it up to $60 million over the next couple of years, $60 million statewide, and significant, these schools would be significant recipients of that. We've also made a commitment for additional social emotional supports through the counselor ratio, additional funding for K-3 basic special education, and there's one thing else I'm forgetting, John. Oh, there's a whole series of additional resources that would go along with the collaborative mechanism. Oh, early childhood education is also something a little bit different. It doesn't, well, some of the commitment was with the district's placements for early education, which is a real priority. In fact, we've been contacted by early education centers, if you will, wondering if they could be part of the collaborative, which my response is they'd be great, because you got to get children prepared to come into preschool and kindergarten. Did you have another question, ma'am?
I do have one more. I promise not to bother.
No, that's okay.
But I'm concerned about what they now call community resource personnel. I'm going to say the police, okay, in a lot of our schools. Is there a plan in terms of improving the CSROs, or, keeping the police in vision, or can we just figure out a way to hire other individuals aside from that, those people? Because this I understand can be a great program, and it would be a shame to have police involvement. I would hope that there would be people who are trained to deal with students who are disruptive throughout the building, throughout the system, and find a way that we can then turn those children around. I'm not saying that every child, no child is incorrigible to me. I just have a different way of dealing with kids. But what I see and what I hear, what I observe, it's not a good program right now for what we're doing.
Yeah, I think I understand your concern. My experience has been different than that, with the resource officers that I've seen, in fact, including the one that was here the day that, who's that?
He's amazing. He has a great relationship with our kids here. They all look forward to seeing him. He helps support us to take our kids home and do outreach. So we do have a great, our administration makes sure to
And his wife is the state teacher of the year. But your concern is well taken, and I think what we hear about that and the maybe the stereotype of what it is has changed. Certainly, it would be an issue for the collaborative trustee board.
And
Because the idea is not just to automatically suspend students or do this or send them off to whatever. It's to come up with an approach that is suitable for each child.
If I could, I was just going to piggyback off that. I'm a former principal of 2 different high schools and have had, fortunately, great SROs who become part of our community and part of our staff. And so the same thing, I don't know that the stigma, it certainly didn't fit the situations that I was in, where they became proactive supports for our students and our families in our building. And then you heard mention of Officer Tabron, who I've known for a number of years. He fits that bill as well. And so I think that oftentimes that perception gets out there when we hear about the negative things in the news, and I don't know that there's enough of the positive things being shared that they do in our buildings.
Not to take anything away from the officer or the other officers who have successfully, involved themselves with the various schools. I grew up in a school system where we didn't have police. I grew up where we had, they were called non-teaching assistants. And those individuals did the same thing that the police now do in our schools. They were from the community. or they were from someplace nearby, and our children, we knew, our parents knew them, our teachers knew them. We had great relationships with these individuals. So my concern is that police have other things to do. That's what I would like to say. The police, as I grew up, had a great relationship to a certain point with the children in our school. They would come, they would do presentations, they would get involved, they would do the police thing, right? So I'm not saying that 100% they're bad or they're negative. I know that there's good and bad, but as a person who grew up without having that appearance in our schools, it worked for us. I don't understand why it can't work again. And especially if the people are from the community or from your district, inside. You're hiring folks, you're giving them a job. Some people were degreed people, some were not. So I just think it's a consideration.
Thank you, and obviously, again, would be an issue for the board. We've got.
As we're sitting here talking to each other, my concern is piggybacking off of what she's saying, but it's amazing how I too grew up in an environment, they were called monitors when I came along, and how much money are we actually budgeting for additional personnel to come into the schools to eliminate having the RSOs? Or do we plan on adding additional teachers' aides? Are we going to add additional hall monitors, bathroom monitors? What is our plan as far as the recruitment for additional personnel?
Yeah, so it's in a significant, Dr. Shelton was saying to me, it was a significant amount of resources. But again, I don't want to sit here and say it's going to be for this and that and the other thing. We have categories that I just mentioned in terms of opportunity funding, the counselors, K-3 basic, special education, preschool categories, but the board will kind of determine what are those additional supports that we hear from the teachers they need to be supportive, to have classrooms that are well managed, to have the kind of climate that you need where children that are struggling with emotional issues and children that are at the top of their game there can both be successful. I mean, I think that's kind of the point, and it's been a hard thing for us to communicate. People want me to tell them exactly what it's going to look like, when that's why we're impaneling this board to do that, who understands the issues that we're talking about. I've grown to understand better talking to teachers, knocking on doors in the neighborhood, talking to parents, talking to children themselves over the last 6 months or whatever it is now, and even our work before. But they're in there every day. They know the children. Ms. Suchi took us around the neighborhood. She knows where the kids live. So some of the dynamics in the house and all the rest of it. Yes,
I just want to address both of your questions, because I know you said when you came in you had gone here to Bancroft to school, and I know you said you didn't live here in Wilmington. I just want to, as a teacher here, I've been in the city here for a little over 26 years. This building, I do want to also point out, not only are teachers, you were talking about seeing people, we have 3 of the most amazing administrators. They're all administrators of color. The one that's sitting back here with this crazy ugly sweater on any given day, I can pick up the cell phone and text her about a kid, and she will be, as long as it's in the best interest of kids, she'll let me pull anything off, and she'll do that for any of our children. But I want to also address some of your concerns about support. So we do have a lot of monitors. You guys were talking about instructional monitors and supporting monitors. They're called paras now. We have a great many of those. But our kids are coming in with tremendous trauma, tremendous issues that what they've seen that wasn't the norm when I was a kid in the 60s. So we're trying to maintain those, and so some of those wraparound services, we currently have an MOU through Christina. So the thought process, and this is just the thought process, Mr. Patton tell you, I have lots of those. The thought process is maybe what we did here in Christina, we could continue to make it better, and we could have, our kids are very transient, and so they're not getting jumped and literally move across the street and go to a new district, they can have the whole city of Wilmington. When I was a kid, the city of Wilmington was its own district. We grew up here, we all went to one district. So what they did in one building and in one district was able to transfer. So the kids shouldn't have to go across the street and have to start a whole new curriculum, what's the grade configuration if you're not familiar with the city. The district that's right next door to us has a totally different grade configuration, meaning who's in their building. So I'm a parent, and I came from a building of K1-2, a different building, 3-4-5, and then I come into this district, which is right across the street, and their buildings are 1-8. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to hope that we can help engage the community. Governor Carney was out with me walking. I want you to know he did not only talk to one kid. I know he keeps harping on Carlos. He talked to over 180 families that had all kinds of amazing stories. We had parents in our community that offered to do pathways in our schools. We had a social worker. I handed him my business card and said, hey, you want a job in Christina? Call me and I'll put you in touch with our HR people. So there are people in the community. So that's the hope. We're hoping that what we have in the support, we have board members in our school district that were former educators, that were educators and principals here in the city. So they understand our kids, they know what our kids need, and we just want to make sure that we have the best interest of kids always at heart. And so it's not a political thing, it's not about who's in power, it's about making sure that the kids have the support they need the way they need it.
As you can hear, Ms. Suchi's a force of nature, and she was a great tour guide for us on all Saturday.
Governor, we got a question from Kim Stock, who I know we know last night that we never got to, that I think is relevant tonight. You mentioned that opportunity funding would be used to help pay for this collaborative. Can you just clarify, is that more money on top of the dedicated resources for low-income students and English learners? I think Kim's concern was it would eat into some of that money that's already being used there.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but we are ramping up opportunity funding to a level of $60 million a year statewide. This year we're less than 30, I want to say. We'll go to 38 this current fiscal year, and so 60 will be either next year or the year after. So that's a significant increase. That's not just for these schools, it's for schools across the state, but we'll have money in the governor's recommended budget for the collaborative, including some resources, I think, for early education and some of the supports for the collaborative itself. Other questions and comments? I know we're getting close to the time when the Eagles will beat the Washington football team, and anybody who has a Washington football team sweatshirt on. Any other questions that we've got online or in the house? Again, then I want to thank everybody. Again, special recognition for Don for coming. He's made all 4 of our town hall meetings. Not the other 2 were in other school districts, and Vince Lofink, the former Representative Lofink, is 3 out of 4. Not bad. And we appreciate our hosts here at Christina and at Bancroft. We still are charging forward with the plans to build a new Bancroft. It's really pretty exciting. The price tag keeps going up, which is good and bad depending on your perspective, but we're working really hard on it, and we've got a great partner in the district in doing all that. So take a look at what's available. The next meeting is going to be probably not next Tuesday. Is it next Tuesday or?
It will be the third Tuesday of January, 6 p.m. in this building.
Right here. So more about that. Many of us have been to, we had walkthrough in the summertime where we just walked the whole perimeter, and people had a chance to look at the diagrams, and this is going to be here, that's going to be there, and so we continue to work on those plans. So thank you all for coming. Have a great holiday. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. God bless you all. Go Eagles.